A few weeks ago I went on holiday to Norway. Now it was a holiday, I didn't want to get too weighed down with kit, so I decided it would be the perfect opportunity to try out the Canon EOS M6 along with the 18 to 150mm f3.5 to 5.6 lens. My hope was that this combination would offer almost everything I needed in a small convenient package, perfect for travelling, although obviously there were going to be a few compromises. But most of all, I was interested in seeing in just what the tiny Canon EOS M6 was like. And so this is it. This is my quick review of the Canon EOS M6. Now, before we get into all the details, we do need to talk a little bit about the Canon EOS M range. It didn't get off to a great start. The original EOS M had quite slow autofocus, and it wasn't what most Canon photographers had been expecting. Sales of the camera weren't great, and the EOS M2 wasn't even released in Europe or the USA. The EOS M3 offered some improvements, but it was last year's EOS M5 that finally delivered what many Canon users had first wanted: a small Canon mirrorless camera that behaved and operated more like the Canon DSLRs that they really know and love. And so along comes the EOS M6. In features, it's very similar to the EOS M5. However, as you can see, it's got more of a rangefinder style body, and it lacks the electronic viewfinder of last year's camera. So what's the key to the EOS M6? It's got to be the sensor. It has the same 24.2 million pixel sensor that is used in a number of other Canon EOS cameras, including the M5, but most notably it's the same, or at least very similar to the sensor used in the Canon EOS 80D. Now, looking at a spec sheet, on paper the sensor in the M6 is rather conventional. It's a pretty standard resolution. However, it uses dual pixel AF, which is currently the ace up Canon's sleeve. Basically, dual pixel AF is a form of phase detection autofocus. This means that the Canon EOS M6 has almost edge-to-edge phase detection focus across the scene, and better still, it can be used with this articulated touchscreen. Now, for video users, that's especially useful, as it means you get quick, precise focus without that bounce that you get from contrast detection. When you pair that with a front-facing screen and face detection tracking, you've got a great camera for vlogging or producing YouTube videos. In terms of the build and handling of the camera, it's going to feel very familiar to Canon users. All of the buttons and dials on here are very logically placed. Everything is easy to touch. It feels very well built and steady. It feels like a kind of hybrid of a Canon DSLR and a Canon PowerShot compact camera. As you would expect, the Canon EOS M6 has built-in Wi-Fi, and it even has its own dedicated Wi-Fi button. Now, I've used this to transfer images from the camera to an iPhone, and then once saved, open the images in Lightroom, and the whole process is really quick. There's even an NFC spot on the camera to create a really quick connection between it and mobile phones. And Bluetooth technology is also employed to maintain a low-powered connection between the camera and the phone, and that speeds up the time that it takes to connect and transfer the images. So, as I hinted at, one of the key features of the EOS M6 is this, the front-facing articulated screen. It faces the front rather than the side, as it does on the 80D. Now, the EOS M5 also had an articulated screen, but this one folded down and came below the camera. But that meant you couldn't view the screen when it's mounted to a tripod, which does seem like a bit of a glaring error and didn't please many people who wanted to use the camera for video. But the EOS M5 isn't perfect for video either. Now, to start with, it only shoots 1080p at up to 60 frames a second. Not surprisingly, there's no 4K. Now, it does have an external microphone socket, and if you want to mount a microphone to the hotshoe, it kind of gets in the way when you're using that front-facing screen. There are a couple of little workarounds to this microphone issue, and I'll put links to those in the description below. So the EOS M6 isn't really designed as a camera for serious filmmaking, but it does have most of the tools you'll need for shooting some casual video content. And this is what it's like vlogging on the Canon EOS M6. It's nice and small and light, and I've got it mounted just in front of me on a monopod that I'm holding out about nearly a metre away from me probably, with the 18 to 150mm lens. Video wise, I'm at 1080p, 50 frames a second, and pretty much everything is set to auto in terms of exposure, and I'm on the face detection focus, which should be really good because remember, it's phase detection. Now as I walk through the shade, hopefully the camera will adjust the exposure. Might get a little bit of lens flare going on as I'm walking in and out of the branches, but the exposure seems to be changing quite nicely, and the focus up there I can see on the screen seems to be holding pretty well. So it's worth noting that the Canon EOS M6 uses lens-based optical stabilisation when you're shooting still images. However, when you're shooting video, it combines this with an electronic stabilisation, a digital stabilisation, to help keep the video smooth and steady. Now, this does create 5-axis stabilisation, but it's not going to be as good as you'd find from a Sony or Panasonic or Olympus camera. However, I found that for most users, actually the combination of sort of digital electronic stabilisation and optical stabilisation is going to be perfectly fine. You can judge for yourself on this video clip as to how steady it's being and whether or not it will work for you. Now remember, it doesn't shoot 4K, so this isn't going to be a camera that serious videographers are going to be using. It's going to be casual use, vlogging, travel, family occasions, and for that I found the video is actually really good. You might just want to think about whether you need 4K to actually sort of future-proof those memories. Okay, so we need to talk about image quality. Now, as we've said, this sensor is already something of a known quantity because it's used in a few other cameras. And without meaning to sound harsh, it's quite unremarkable. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing, it just kind of does what it does. It does it very well and it just gets on with it. It doesn't have super high resolution or the dynamic range that we've seen in other recent sensors, but what it does provide you is a good balance between resolution, dynamic range and color rendition. The end result is that you can get some great images straight out of the camera using Canon's built-in picture profiles, image styles. But if you shoot RAW, there's also plenty of detail in those files to make some quite dramatic changes to the images. The EOS M6 is available in a kit with the 18 to 250mm lens for around £1,080. It's also available with a 15 to 45mm kit lens, and that comes in at £840, whilst the body on its own is quite a reasonable £730. So as a stills camera, the EOS M6 provides the image quality that you'd expect from a Canon DSLR, but just in a smaller, lighter package. However, perhaps what makes it most attractive is that dual pixel AF system. This makes focusing so quick and straightforward, and it sets the bar very high for mirrorless cameras. That autofocus system comes into its own when shooting video. It's a fast and reliable focusing system, and it's one of the reasons that Canon DSLRs such as the 80D are so popular for shooting casual video. However, the fact that the front-facing screen is obscured if you mount a microphone and the lack of 4K may put off some of those looking for a video camera. Now, what's going to appeal most to Canon photographers is the fact that the EOS M mount is basically a smaller version of the existing EF lens mount. So all of your EF lenses should operate on the EOS M6 exactly like they will do on a dual pixel autofocus DSLR. If you want to mount your existing EF lenses to the EOS M6, the EF to M mount will set you back around £90. So the Canon EOS M6, it isn't the perfect mirrorless camera, but it may just be perfect for Canon users who want something smaller and looking less like a DSLR than the EOS M5. I certainly enjoyed using it, and I'm looking forward to picking it up again in the near future. So that's it, that's the Canon EOS M6. You know the deal by now. What do you guys think of the camera? Please tell us in the comments below. We'll try and answer any questions that you may have, and if you like the video, click thumbs up, hit subscribe so you make sure you get all the latest photo gear news.